Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion, and our second hour is general discussion. If you've got questions, go ahead and throw those in. You can ask those in Makana and make sure to vote on them so that we know which order you'd like us to do it in. And also, you can use askofficehours.global. So askofficehours.global. You can use that little QR code there and ask your questions there. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the first question. CJ, what do we have?
Ed Judge in West Granby, Connecticut. While sharing my screen in a Zoom meeting, I'd like to zoom in on an area of the screen. I'm on a Mac and have Zoom turned on under accessibility. The screen zooms in when I use Control plus the scroll wheel, but participants do not see any change.
Good, CJ.
So this is one of my favorite Mac OS features. It's one of the first things I turn on every single time because I'm always showing people how to do things. The trouble is when you're in a Zoom, when you're using Zoom's built-in screen share functionality, it doesn't respect when you have your Mac screen shared and you do the control scroll to zoom in on the whole screen. I'm using an ATEM with the HDMI fed in, so it's seeing it as a camera and not a virtual screen. One way you might achieve this is by doing a screen capture within OBS and then using an OBS virtual camera as the screen share source. That will allow that will respect the Mac OS full screen share. The other thing you might try, and I wasn't able to test this before the show, is right here, change the zoom style from full screen to picture-in-picture. That'll actually create a little box that you can choose what size it is and where it goes to display your zoom. And also, if you go into choose display, you can even choose one of your other displays to shoot that zoom to. So you can have, if you have that display available as another camera. The last thing I'll say is if you go into the advanced menu and play around, they've really grown up in terms of how many different options you can have on how you utilize that zoom. I was impressed when I looked at this morning. So a couple options there for you.
That's great. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. Hit and Mix is announcing a version of their digital audio workstation RipX for the Apple Vision Pro. While this is a first step, could you see other digital audio workstation makers like Apple, Logic following suit? And there's a link.
Good, Courtney.
You know, I'll be the curmudgeon. I'm sorry, but I don't think this is a good idea. I looked at their website, and if you take a look at how they're kind of using it, you got the timeline kind of sticking out in 3D space and panels kind of flying out off the wall for, you know, pieces of the screen that are normally just sitting on one screen. And I don't think I need to see the head or the music tracks on all the tracks flying at me from the corner of the room. It seems like a gimmick to me, and I think it would be harder to mix off of virtual controls. I noticed that when we had the demo on of the new Moog synthesizer, which was designed for Apple Vision Pro. And it just seemed to be a whole lot harder to actuate the controls or to affect the synthesis. And the same thing goes for here. This is an audio workstation. You're going to get work done. You're not going to spend 8 hours inside those binoculars with your eyes starting to cross after a while because things are at different spots in the room. I just don't get it. I think it's more of a gimmick than anything else.
I think as someone who has an Apple Vision Pro, I can spend a lot of time in it. Like I don't really feel I haven't spent more than about 4.5 hours in it at one time, but that 4.5 hours, I just suddenly noticed that I'd spent a lot of time in it. When I took the headset off, I had watched a movie and I had done some other things, and you get used to it. I think the big advantage of putting applications inside the Vision Pro is that right now it's limited to one computer. And so what you end up with is a limited displays that you can put up. So by moving your DAW into the Vision Pro, it means that you're able to build lots and lots of displays that you can put up. So I physically have that, but most people don't. So I have 8 monitors like around me that I can move things around. Like I've got chats and things and all kinds of data and everything else all around me. And so that's a real problem for, I think there are going to be DAWs that are going to be in there. I think Logic most likely will be the first full-featured DAW that ends up in it because it's Apple's. But I think that there'll be some pressure to do that because you're going to be able to look at your content. I think that I do agree with Courtney that the way that they're visualizing those things is difficult. Like I don't know why. It's a little bit of a gimmick. But remember that you can tie Bluetooth back into it. So you can have all of your analog. We talked about this with Moog the other day. I can have lots of analog controls. I can have a keyboard. I can have dials. I can have all kinds of interfaces that are built in that I'm still touching with all the monitors that are there available. And when we think about it at home, it may not make as much sense. But one of the things that people are already using Quest for and have been using Quest for is being able to edit on the plane. 3 monitors opened in front of them, and they're able to edit something they just shot in Tokyo while they're flying back to LA. And so those are the kind of things that I think you're going to see. I think that extending your display, I think is really what is going to make a difference for these dolls. I think a lot of that, and then there will be some things that are just interesting to see. I don't know which parts of those are, but we'll see people experiment with them. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I don't think especially if you're mixing music or something, the headsets in the Apple Vision Pro are going to be up to the par to deliver the kind of full frequency response stuff. And it's going to be generating spatial audio for you. I mean, the only application I might see where it may make a difference is to visualize the position of instruments and stuff and spatial audio layout if you're going to virtually move them around in space. So it might be useful for that. There are 3D, overhead views and things like that in workstations now that lets you position things in Atmos and fly things around in 3D space, which is represented in like a 3D flat image on the screen that you can move around and look at where it's sitting in 3D space without having to actually visualize it in stereo. But that would be one application for it. But I just don't see the rest of it working that long.
Yep. Go ahead, CJ.
I found myself after a full workday, I spent 10 hours straight, and most of the time I was just mirroring my Mac screen and having a massive Mac OS monitor in front of me. But what I found was that I would take then Vision apps that were unitask things, like I'm going to have a Zoom chat or a Teams chat over here, and messages are over there, and email is over there. I kind of had that around the thing that I was working in. It was almost like a better version of a full screen app because I still had a little bit of context. Where I see it in a creative application like a DAW or an NLE is that I might be able to almost atomize parts of the interface. Like I want to be able to take just the timeline and have that float in its own window. And here's the gallery over here, and here's my inspector. And then I can make my viewer window imitate as if I was in a mixing theater and had a 120-inch screen in front of me. That's where I'm really looking forward to seeing how these creative app companies figure out how to utilize the Vision.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that I think Moog is the one that's the furthest along right now of understanding that we're going to change the way you suddenly have different ways of interfacing with the content and with the data. And we've been, I think that still having it tied in where I can use a mouse and a keyboard and possibly some other interfaces, but you may find that there are things you want to do with just your hands, and we don't know exactly what those are yet. And so I think that it'd be hasty to say that it's not going to work. I don't think it's going to. I think that the early ones are going to be, we're still in very early days of what this looks like. So I think that we're going to see a lot of evolution, but I do think that folks that are, constrained for space could end up with something that is a lot, that they could get a lot of stuff done. I do agree that probably wouldn't be where I do the final mix, but as far as assembly and putting things together and everything else and getting them all ready and getting them pretty close, I think you could do a lot of damage inside of one of these headsets. Next question.
Next question is from John Nichols in Concord, California. I'm producing a digital-first corporate event in a few weeks for my team of 125 people. Options for viewing venue include a movie theater. Any advice on what to check for with the theater? Any gotchas to consider?
There's so many gotchas. So theaters are, so there's a couple things. How are you going to tie in the audio? So is the audio something that's easy for you to tie into that theater? The better the theater is, the harder it'll be to tie in and the more resistant they'll be to doing it. So in some cases we end up using our own speakers for those things, especially if it's locally driven. Now if it's remote driven, if you really are doing a digital first and everyone's coming in remotely and they're all being fed in, it's a simpler thing. Think about how mix minus is going to work. So you're going to have people potentially in the theater talking to people who are on the screen, and you really have to think about the echo cancel. Now, if you sometimes can get away with Zoom's echo cancellation, but if there's any delay in the audio, it won't match up, and you'll have problems. So those are the things. That's another thing for you to think about. We often use Dugan Auto Mix to push the mics in the room down when people are talking, and when people are talking in the room, it pushes the zoom down, and so you can kind of vary that process, but it does take some tuning to make that actually work. So make sure that you have that. Think about the angle of incidence to the person. So right now, like for instance, AMC has a bunch of theaters that do that have zoom built into them, so you can do that, but their cameras are off to one corner, which is really, it's fine. Like as a start, I understand why you wouldn't want to do what you need to do, which is really put the cameras in the center and potentially put them on a pole that moves them up a little bit so that the remote person can have a more natural view of the audience there. And you can really take that a long way. But just think about that. The corner shot might not be, it just might feel weird for the speakers, to be looking at the theater from the side. Think about lighting. So when you light the audience, it may make it harder for them to see the screen. So you have to think about the lighting in the room. A lot of theaters will have 5 or 6 different settings, and so you want to be able to move that up and down so that you kind of balance the two. Note that if you use one of the things we've done in theaters is use faster cameras, and so what I mean by that is the Canon ME200 and ME20 both do 200 does a good job. The ME20 does an incredible job of that we can see things in the theater that the audience can't see because the ME20 is a ISO of 4 something million. Like it's just an incredibly low light camera that can make it work. And here's the interesting thing: when you're dealing with that few, with that little light, doing things like putting white on either side of what you're delivering to the theater will light the audience. Like literally, if you just take a strip and put it down. 1/6 on one side and 1/6 on the other and just make it pure white. It's actually a giant light for these theaters, and you can light up your audience and make them more visible on the return if you want to do that. And so you can vary that and vary the colors and vary the brightness and everything else to kind of manage those things. So those are some of the things to think about as you're doing a theater. Bandwidth is a big problem in most theaters unless they really are doing this. If they do this as a business and they have internet for it, but a lot of theaters will not. So the AMC theaters that have Zoom will have dedicated bandwidth. The IMAX theaters that are on the IMAX network have dedicated bandwidth. Most other theaters do not have bandwidth that you could rely on. So you have to really talk to them about what that's going to take to have that there. As far as getting into the projector, it'll depend on the projector. Most of the projectors are Christie or Barco, and most of them have HDMI and SDI inputs, but you have to figure out exactly what it's going to take to put it there. And most projection rooms are going to be big enough for you to put a little table up there. We tend to do production in the projection rooms. It's the safest place to go, and we're right there next to the theater. So if they let you do that, that's fine. But sometimes they also use the projection room as storage. So you have to make sure that there's enough room and not a lot of boxes in there to get around it. I spend a lot of time in projection rooms, and so so think about those things. A lot of times the other thing you'll be challenged with is you're renting the theater for a certain amount of time. They are selling seats the rest of the time. So loading in the day before is usually pretty challenging. If it's a major chain, they don't want to turn the theater off the day before or even the night before. So you end up with a very early load in to be ready for, especially for a morning show. You're probably loading in at midnight, or whatever the last show is. So just kind of keep those things in mind as you think about theaters. Next question.
Andre DeLay in Berlin, around how many % of transparency do you typically apply to lower thirds for corporate event streams with key fill graphics from the QR code?
Courtney?
Well, if they're lower thirds, I'd say 0%. You could have it fade at the edge to blend it into the background. But usually, if you're presenting information that you want people to be able to read, if it's faded in over the top of somebody with a checkered shirt, it's going to make it harder to read. So you can fade it in and fade it out, or have it transition into a nice blend at the end, but not over any of the texture information. But I would bring it in and have it come into 100%, just so it's not confusing if it's over the top of something that's detailed.
Yeah, for text, we generally do 100%. So the text is usually very rarely is that going to be semi-transparent. We even still give it sometimes a drop shadow or something to help separate it so that white over something light is still readable is kind of what we tend to focus on. If you're talking about the actual strap underneath it, it depends. It depends on what people want it to look like. It can be very, very light. Oftentimes, if it's just dark enough, it can actually replace the need for some kind of drop shadow or outlined edge, where you just have it get a little bit darker. And a lot of times 50% or even 25% might be enough to just darken the background underneath it as it works there. I mean, you can think about gradients as well. And so those are other things that you can do to kind of to give it some dimension. But I would say that, you know, the fashion recently has been to keep it, especially for corporate events, is keep it simple. I mean, we went through some stages where, man, the corporations got pretty crazy about look at, I got a new tool, I can do this, and it becomes a real distraction. You want to move just enough to tell people that, hey, there's something going on down there, and you might want to look, but not so much that it becomes annoying that it's happening all the time. So think about that there. But I would say that it's really something. What I would do, what I do is I have clips from corporate events from that company. And I have a little loop of about 2 or 3 minutes. And when I am building lower thirds, I test the lower thirds over real footage that I've had from them in the past, or something I can find on YouTube, and like, does it look good throughout the entire 5 minutes or 3 minutes that I'm looking at it? And is there any places where I see conflicts? And that helps me a little bit, make sure that there's no technical issues. And then it just comes down to creative. Next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida. Alex, when using OpusClip to create shorts, can you elaborate or show some of the things that you're manually editing before posting?
Yeah, let me pull up. I'm sorry that I didn't get this ready here. So this happened a little after I was looking at things. But so Opus is what I use to clip, is what we're using to clip these things. And let me just jump to my dashboard, and I'll give you a sense of what Opus looks like. And we're going to do a longer Opus. There's a new Opus clips. Let me move this to the right monitor. I haven't tried. So one thing I haven't tried is 3.0, which it's now advertising. So you can see this here. So 3.0 is something new. so we'll see what that looks like. But here's a vertical test stream that I haven't started publishing yet. But this was, so what you can see here is, now there's a couple things here. I can change, how it colors some of those things. Those are more in the branding that are over to the side. So, but a lot of times when I'm on a day-to-day basis, what I'm doing is I'm looking at these. I can send it to Premiere. I don't know. I don't use Premiere, so I don't know. I can download it, or I can edit the clip. And I can share it here directly. I don't usually do that. So here's what Opus does. So it's given me a whole bunch of these. And we recorded these as verticals, which look nicer than, and so this was from the one we were talking about from our audio day. So we have this here, and I can say I want to edit the clip. And in here, you're going to see, that this is the setup that it has here. Now, I don't spend a lot of time in it. What I mostly do is I'm deciding, if I roll over something, I can decide that this is, I want to start a little earlier. Oftentimes it's cutting off a word or something like that. So I might, say that if I click on this, I can say I want to change the color, or I want to make this the end point, or this the start point. But what I can do is I can select an image, for instance, and I can just delete that one word. Now it's going to do a jump cut. It does, once it processes, smooths out the audio a little bit, not always perfectly. But it can smooth it out a little bit. And so those are the big things that I do. Now in design, you can do things. I have auto emojis automatically turned off because it drives me nutty. I let it go for a second, and then I was like, this is horrible. Anyway, so I haven't tried to hide the B-rolls. So I haven't, I think this is actually new. And then I have captions turned on. Captions are good for people. I did ask someone that is hard of hearing, and they did say that they kind of expect the captions to be on. There's auto captioning, but it lets you actually take a look at it. So those are the things that I'm adjusting. I'm getting into the habit of adjusting a little bit. This is mostly from prodding from Josh, is that if I'm not sure about where to start, if the start isn't really clean, I add an extra word or two to it. And then because the problem really is that the tools down here to do the edit are really bad. So it's really hard to get an exact edit, here, that I at least I haven't been able to really get something that I'm happy with, where I can cut it perfectly, as well as I can cut it in YouTube of all things. So tuning that clip a little bit, and maybe I just need to get better at it, but tuning the clip a little bit has proven to be easier in YouTube than it is in Opus. But what really saves a lot of time is that, unless we have someone really logging during the show, being able to take a clip and just throw it into Opus and have it just give me 40 ideas, and then I pick, anywhere from 2 to 10, ideas that are out there and output them. And then the things that I look at, I go, oh, if I was watching shorts, I'd be like, oh, this is good. And since I watch a lot of shorts and a lot of TikTok, I feel like I'm good at looking at them and going, eh. And then what I do, now I will say that what I'm doing, and I'm told that this is dangerous, but I still do it, is I put stuff up on shorts, and if it doesn't get 500 views in the first 24 hours, I make it unlisted. So I don't want to break the link if someone linked to it, but I don't necessarily want it showing up on our page. So you'll notice that other than the most recent ones, most of them are all doing pretty well because I've gotten rid of the ones that I decided were clunkers. so he's like, wow, that didn't land. So I'm kind of playing with that view, and it's something that's it's a popular approach in TikTok. I don't know how. And again, I think if I deleted them all the time, I might get, I think that YouTube might not handle that well. But I think that I don't need to necessarily put them all on the page. And I may change the way we do that, but we're kind of playing with that. So anyway, that's what we're doing with Opus. Next question.
Paul Wallace from Hot Springs, Arkansas. What other events would benefit from an LED floor like the one at the NBA Allstar game?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I don't think it's a good idea for sporting events. For announcements like the Galaxy Unpacked, if you saw that is a huge stadium with an LED floor that they've 3D mapped into this 4-story tall LED screen on the back. And if you play it, you can see it. It looks, and it gives a very three-dimensional effect as you see the graphics going from the background screen to the floor, which is at 90 degrees. It looks like it's straight, but it only looks like it's straight. It takes out the bend from this one particular camera angle. So they did the mapping and the distortion of the floor to match the back to give it this 3D effect, but it only works from this one particular camera angle. So the people in the stadium themselves see it bend at the floor level. And that's one possible effect you could use. I can see it used in theatrical presentation plays where you want to have a lot of scene changes, and let's say you have the interior of a house in one scene, and then next scene takes place supposedly outdoors. You could map in some grass and some ground effects to match whatever the environment is supposed to be as the scene changes. So they're using more and more LED screens in Broadway type plays because it makes it a lot cheaper to build and move scene pieces and to create images out windows, etc., even if they're using real scenery props. But so for those things, yes. For sports, anything that involves eye-hand coordination where you're looking downward, like hockey or basketball, I think only in exhibition games should it be used. And in professional games, I don't think they'll allow them to use it.
Go ahead, CJ.
I go to other arena events like hockey, like volleyball, like basketball, where you're going, like Alex brought up the phenomenon of teams that aren't winning all the time need to do a good job of making an event for somewhere that you're going to want to go with your family and bring everyone. So I actually think about minor leagues as this becomes more cost effective. If you were to go to a minor league arena and say, you don't have to hire a crew to come in and switch it from basketball to volleyball, or when you switch teams, you don't need to come in and lay in a new floor to put the new logo in the middle. That's a big labor savings just from a business point of view. And then your ability to entertain the crowd in the pregame, in the timeouts, in the halftimes, all those other things really expand. So I like the idea that was from the company that made the technology in the first place of here's how we can improve the ability for arenas to turn events.
It didn't sound like when they designed it that they had even thought about doing animations and everything else. They were just like, you won't have to fix the stripes. We can change we can change all those things. That's all they were thinking about when they built it. And then someone was like, what if we animated? I'm sure that they were like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. That would be crazy because that would drive everybody nuts. And they're like, I don't know if it'll drive everybody nuts. There's only one way to find out. And I was surprised at how the basketball players actually didn't react to it that much. And I wonder whether you don't see it as much at that angle, from the ground. Where it's not as clear. So it'll be interesting to see, what happens there. Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, the only challenge that I saw from the still photography is that everybody's uplit. It's like everybody's got this kind of little glow from coming off the floor.
I kind of liked it. It's kind of Oprah lighting for everybody. But I think that the challenge you always get into when you see anything on the floor is how do you handle the other side of the room, because it's always upside down for somebody, so or sideways for someone. So I think that's the other challenge. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Ubiquiti will be mandating multi-factor authentication starting on July 22nd. I currently use Authy for all my MFA needs. Would it be safest for a core service like accessing my router to use their own UI Verify app or stick with Authy?
I go to CJ.
We had a question about this a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. Authy's actually going into end of life. Twilio is EOLing Authy on the 19th of March. So if Authy's your main driver for MFA, you should probably find a new horse anyway. If it's something like my router, I would want to use the manufacturer's direct because I don't want to depend on a third-party point of failure for something that's mission critical. But you might want to look into other options like Authenticator or Duo for things if you're trying to get it, or even 1Password to have it all in one place.
Good, Samuel.
Yeah, this is regarding Unified's cloud accounts. And if you really want the security, then I would consider just doing a local login into your routers instead of doing it through the cloud. Then you don't need this, but I'm not sure that the Unify will win this, the authentication. I don't think they're the right company to do this on a big scale, but perhaps for their own products.
It's funny, with Meraki, I know that's what I'm familiar with. I barely know how to log into it locally. like the routers, you stop thinking about the routers being local. You just go onto the cloud service. Even if the router is sitting right next to you, you go into the cloud service and start, managing it. But unless something really goes horribly wrong, you never think about the idea that you would log into the router. That's an interesting thing. Next question.
From the QR code, it's Manny from Dallas. What are you guys using to switch your show? Zoom, Teams, WebEx? I see 2 and 4 boxes. I do a ton of corporate events, and we sometimes have 10 guests. What's the best way to do these? I have a Ross Carbonite switcher, so how can I integrate them all?
Oh, man. How do we switch this show? So the show itself is switched on an ATEM switcher. And we are using, and I think you probably could do it on a Ross switcher. It would just take a lot of, it would take some work with Ross to do that. And it's an interesting puzzle. And I know that we just got Mukana, which is the Q&A system that you just asked this question on, working in expressions from Ross. And so I think that there's some opportunities there. What happens is that we need to not only switch it up to 10, for us it's up to 16 people, but we also need to be able to have someone switch it from anywhere in the world. And so what we're using is we use a program called Universe to generate an interface, and that interface can be opened on a web page, it can be opened on an iPad, it can be opened in a lot of different things, and that basically then sends commands to a company, to an application called Isadora from Troikatronics, and Isadora is the brain. So Isadora makes a bunch of decisions. It's getting data, so it's getting who raised their hands and how it all worked from Okana. It's getting the next questions. It has a whole bunch of decision processes there. So the super sources are generated dynamically. There's a lot of things that are happening in the back end automatically. So the TD then is cutting the show by hitting that web interface, so that it's, and so they're just selecting it, and then it's making all those other decisions to make that work and building all those things. You'll note, you don't see it here, but we have little numbers that tell the system who we are, so in the system. And so that helps it kind of figure out who to go where. So it's not really just using a simple system. It is there. And all of this, we're talking to each other all in Zoom, then we're using Zoom ISO to send all of our individual 1080p feeds out of Zoom. And Zoom is the only one that I know of that will let you take multiple 1080p feeds out at 1080p. I think that WebEx, and I don't know about WebEx, but Teams is limited. Once you have more than 2 people, Teams is limited to 720. So, and I will say Zoom ISO really changes how you think about production. So at minimum, what I would say, to answer your question, that's how we do it. To answer your question, as you start to go down the path, what you want to look for, I think, is Zoom ISO, and that's from Liminal. Liminal is now owned by Zoom, so they're pretty tight relationship there, but they manage a lot of the broadcast graphics there. But what you're looking for is Zoom ISO. Zoom ISO, and you can take a Mac Mini and get 8 outputs out of each Mac Mini. We do 8. Yeah, we do 8 out of there. So each Mac Mini, an M2 Mac Mini with a Sonnet box and a Blackmagic quad card will punch out 8 1080p ISOs at about 55% utilization. So it's still got a lot of headroom. And so you can push those out. It'll actually send audio over Dante if you'd like to. So it'll push all that out, or there's a lot, or you can have it embedded in the audio that comes out of it if you choose to do that. So that's the first step for you. Is if you have up to 10 people, I'd probably look at either 2 or 3. If it was up to 10, the way I would do it in production is probably have 2 or 3 Mac Minis, and I'd generally be shooting for 4 outputs per Mac Mini just to give me tons of headroom and flexibility. But you could put 8 into one and have a backup of an 8 or maybe a third one there. And then you're pushing those all out as SDI feeds. You're dropping those into your carbonite switcher, and now you're just able to cut the show and build the show however you'd like. So that's how we're building that to do it. And I do think that we can all talk about what's good about Zoom or Teams or WebEx. If you're doing production that you want to look good, Zoom is the answer. And there is no close second currently. I'm not saying that there'll never be Zoom. From what I would say right now is that Teams is a distant second. WebEx is moving the fastest. They're putting the most effort into catching up with Zoom. But Zoom is like a long way. If you had 1 through 10 and Zoom was 10, Teams is like 4 or 5. And then everything else is clumped into one, and so with WebEx kind of coming up moving fast towards 2 or 3. So that's, from someone who does this with all these different devices, with all these different things, there's not really anything that has the level of control or the level of access that Zoom has right now. Hopefully they can keep that momentum going, because I do think that people are kind of gunning for them at this point, but the team there is pretty strong. So it'll take some time. Next question.
Next question from Justin James in Arizona. I'm planning to travel with 3 Stream Decks XLs plus the stand. Any suggestions for a case or way to safely travel with them?
Go ahead, CJ.
Well, as someone who's been sometimes chided for having a bunch of Stream Decks taped together, I feel your pain. The one thing to remember about the Stream Decks is that there is a screen behind those buttons. So I've seen people who don't put enough padding around them end up with a big crack through the screen, and then they have to figure out what to do with them. So what I would suggest is get a small Pelican or even something like a projector case with pluck and peel, remove the Stream Deck from the stand, and then you just have that little flat panel, and then you could put 3 of them in pretty compactly. The other thing that I would consider is if you have a 3D printer, or look, there's a million things on Etsy, find something that is not the built-in stand that can manage 3 Stream Decks at once, because then you might be able to compact that down, because if you can find something that's foldable, that's going to be a lot better to travel with than those little L shapes.
Courtney?
Yeah, CJ covered it pretty much. I'd say I haven't done the math with the height of the Stream Deck, but this 1510 protector, you could just cut some slits in here and stack 3 of them in here with about an inch, at least 1 or probably 2 pick and pluck layers between each one. And then you could cut a slot over here for the stands and stack the magnetic stands and shove them all in there. They're not as important to keep isolated because they're just plastic. And then you'd still have a room to carve out a piece in here to store all your cables in. And this is a carry-on case, so you can carry it in your overhead. So if you're traveling and you want to make sure you get there with them, and that the luggage handlers haven't sent it on a flight to Timbuktu, you'd be sure you'd have it with you. But check to make sure that the height of this case will accommodate the depth of that screen, and with about an inch of it sticking out at the top, so that you can easily put them in and take them out.
One of the things we do with a lot of our monitors is that we put little Velcros on the corners, and then we have little plexiglass or other things or some kind of riser over top of it that we set it over top just to protect the screen. And we do that with 24-inch monitors. We'll put Velcro across the top and bottom. We have plexiglass that we set, because the number one thing that was getting broken by TSA was monitors. getting packed back badly. And no matter how we packed them, it was problematic. So I would think about those kinds of things. The next thing to think about is a sleeve, some kind of soft sleeve. And by the way, you could print something. You could print a little top that just you put over it. I'm sure that Etsy has something that will. There are so many options in Etsy. If you haven't looked at Stream Deck in Etsy, try it. Like there's so much creativity there. So there's just lots of everything you could think of that you might want to do with your Stream Deck. Someone's already thought of and printed one. And so think about that. But you could print your own. The other thing to think about is a soft case for it. There's lots of little soft neoprene cases that you might want to put those in. One of the things I do when I don't have a case for it, Domke, D-O-M-K-E, makes these soft wraps. They have Velcro on the corners, and you can wrap them around. They're really built for lenses, but you can wrap them around objects. So, and they come in all different sizes, and they have these. They're just a flat, soft piece, and if you're already covering it, it's not going to handle like hard pushes, but it's kind of like having that's TJ has one there. That's what they look like there. And I have a lot of those. so I have a lot of these at different sizes. If you have something like a lens or a camera or something that just isn't quite, you just want to keep it from getting banged up. These are great little things to just wrap around your objects. And again, they come in all different sizes. And I don't know, I probably have 10 or 15 of them in different sizes that I throw around things. It's kind of like having reusable bubble wrap. That's about the level of protection that it provides. Next question.
From the QR code, it's John C. Idelson from Monterey, California. Has anyone worked with the Atomos ZATO CONNECT 5.2-inch network-connected video monitor and recorder? Would this be a good tool for a remote kit?
I guess I would say it depends on what you're trying to use it for as the remote kit. It's a fine monitor. I have one. It works fine. It's been hit and miss for what I bought it for. So I bought it to be able to get webcams and convert them to HDMI, which is what it kind of sells. And I know that Guy has had success with that. I have not. So I just have a hard time getting it to pass that through. Overall, though, I thought the monitor was pretty nice, but it depends on what you're using it for. It's at the same price, you can get a larger monitor if you don't need the network capabilities or the recording capabilities. And so you just have to look at, what those, again, Atomos and others, or Atomos has other monitors as well, but there's lots of other monitors, whether it's Feel World or the one that Lilliput, they're all in that range. But the Atomos build is really nice. But I would say it depends on what you need it for. It's a little small. So it's not something I would put into a normal kit just because the screen is too small. And I will tell you, the funny thing about it is when I have a screen that small, you know what I use? A Pix 240 because I've got audio routing in the Pix 240. It's a funny problem. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. The Rolling Stones are heading back out on tour, and Dave Natale, front-of-house mixer, is famous for not only mixing on the Yamaha PM4000, but also using no dynamics and minimal effects. Wouldn't mixing without dynamics control not be optimal in most cases?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think they'll probably have some dynamics for feedback control, which is a dynamic frequency-sensitive feedback control. But, Mick Jagger has been working with that SM58 for 60 years. He knows his Mac technique, and he likes to scream, and people like to hear a little bit of distortion when he screams. So I think they've learned that not to use dynamics on any of the vocals. The other stuff, he's probably skilled enough to not need it. And that band has been on the road for so many years. They know all the dynamics. The dynamics are right here in the fingers.
And by the way, as a quick note, for Manny, who asked the question about Ross, if you're in our Discord, you're looking for Bo Cordell. So Bo Cordell is the person that you want to ping about how to use Zoom with your Ross switcher. Next question.
Richard Armstrong from London. Not sure my ask yesterday was clear enough. I want to video a user wearing a Vision Pro while interacting with spatial content from the perspective of the camera. Perhaps 2 Vision Pros needed, for example. And he's got a link there to the Apple Hello Vision Pro.
CJ?
So I looked at this. It seems like what he's looking to do is get a shot like this, where you have a user who is in the Vision and you're seeing from a third-party perspective what they're seeing. Right now, there's no way to do this. This was not a native Vision Pro thing. They spent some money making that happen.
yeah, that's not a screen capture. Yeah, so that's that is a welcome to After Effects. So that is that they definitely comp those screens onto those. I have done lots of those kinds of screens, not for this project specifically, but and I've done them in both After Effects Motion and Resolve. So those three have been very effective in making that work. Go ahead, CJ.
One thing I really do hope comes to the Vision Pro, fingers crossed for WWDC, is that when you're with another Vision Pro user, that you can both be in the same spatial environment. Like my brother and I and one other person at work all have the Vision Pro. And there's times where one of us is in the Vision and the rest of us are looking at it on a screen. If we all had the Vision on, we could be interacting with it collaboratively, which I think there's a big opportunity there that's just not in the software yet.
It does appear that the 3D environments are that they're going to be coming. If you look at JigSpace, they say collaboration is on its way. It does feel like when you send someone a USDZ file over FaceTime when you're talking to them in the headset, you feel like there's going to be some point where you're both looking at the same thing. like there's got to be, that can't be something that someone didn't think of, because the first time you open it, the first thing you think of is, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Like, it is the first thing that pops into your head. So I think that that's that's something to think about there. So I do think that we're going to see a lot of growth there. I will say that it's kind of amazing to sit and I was working with some models, 3D models, some USDZ files, and sending them back and forth to a friend, and we were talking about what we were developing and how it got done. And I was like, oh, I could do this for a long time. I could sit in all day reviewing things. And, I think that's going to be the thing that's really interesting in that puzzle. Again, if you want to see if you have a headset and you want to see what's possible there, go to everything. What was it? What was the
beautifulthings.xyz?
Beautifulthings.xyz. There's tons of models there. And what you can do is go up there. And what I did, every time you click on them, it just said, do you want to download it? So I just went and downloaded all the models into a folder. It's about 600 megs of files, or maybe it's 600 gigs of files. No, 600 megs. Okay, it was 600 megs of files. Anyways, it seemed like a lot of files. Anyway, so I downloaded almost all of them. You can also go to the Smithsonian and grab great things. Some of the stuff in Beautiful Things is from the Smithsonian. So there's some overlap there. But I think that, and hopefully we're going to see a lot more there, but I think that passing those things back and forth as the headset becomes more prevalent in sales. One of the things that we did early on, and I think is going to become more popular, is real estate for very high end houses. So there's probably not enough margin, and the new regulations have cut the margin on the houses of how much the companies can make selling the houses, and so I think that that's going to cut into how much they spend on it. So it actually affects our business, that they can't make as much money on that. But I think that for houses that are, north of $2 or $3 million a unit, which sounds like a crazy number. For many of you, that $2 million house sounds like a crazy thing, but welcome to almost every house in Marin. So anyway, it's like, that's what it feels like anyway. And so I think that when you get into those kinds of numbers, being able to do a walkthrough of the house before you get there, I think is something that, and being able to put headsets on. And we did some test work for Oculus and Vive for using, like things like Matterports to let people go to a house and walk through it. And then one of the things we did with Ozos is an Ozo is a 360 live camera. And so what we would do is I'll have a couple Ozos placed in the house, and quietly, if you have 3 Ozos placed in the house, what you're doing is quietly moving them from one place to another while you're doing the walkthrough. But we'd actually have a live realtor sitting there talking to you about the house, and they could answer questions from the audience. So so there'd be 50 people. It'd be like an open house, a virtual open house. Maybe like 50 people online, and they're just answering questions that are coming in using something like Makana. So anyway, they'd be able to answer the questions coming in about the living room, and then they go, okay, now we're going to go to the kitchen, and you'd see them walking out, and then it would cut to the kitchen, and you'd see them walking in, and you could be looking around and asking questions about it. And it was very effective. It was still too expensive. It was for us to execute that. We couldn't get it below about 18 grand, to do, to get the setup for and get it really working the way it needs to be done. And we were trying to get to 6. So those are the kind of things that we're working on. It would take us and we could do it. We just knew that it would take a dedicated truck that had everything set up to reduce labor costs. Anyway, next question.
From the QR code, it's John Murillo from El Cerrito, California. Is there a good resource to learn all about networking with an emphasis on production?
Good, Samuel.
Yeah, I would start looking at Audinate. They have some courses. It's quite basic networking relatively, but it gives you a good introduction. There's a lot of resources for learning networking, but production, there's not so many. But Doug Johnson Production, he has some good videos about networking. So I would check out them. If you want to get more into networking, then Cisco has some courses. You have to do a lot of reading on them, so it's not so interactive. But they've got quite good simulation tools if you want to learn the Cisco ecosystem with their CLI and everything. Look at Skills for All. If you're in a institution, then you can look at Netcad. It's slightly better, in my opinion, than Skills for All. And also YouTube. There's a lot of good resources on YouTube. A lot of them were mentioned on the show yesterday.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, Samuel covered a lot of good stuff for just networking in general. If you're talking about television, networking for television, the future of television, which is all signal handling going over IP networks, take a look at SMPTE has a number of courses in understanding ST2110, which is the protocol that's going to be used for carrying television visual images over networking. And their next one is a virtual instructor coming up on April 22nd. They do charge you about $149 if you're a member and $349 if you're not. Student memberships are available for SMPTE, and it's a good source for finding a lot of information on especially television production and video production and the tools that are used in that. You'll find a lot of the standards covered, and they have a big library of these videos as well as books that you can buy on this more esoteric, network signaling that's used in production. So take a look at smpde.org. SMPTE.
Yeah, I was going to say, Courtney, oftentimes you spell it out rather than just saying SMPTE, and you've been doing it a lot longer than me. Is there a reason to spell it out?
Well, it's an acronym. Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers is what it stands for. SMPTE. There's periods in there. And so you pronounce them.
It's like so many.
SMPTE.
So many
Sometimes
letters.
If you say SMPTE, people don't know what you're talking about. But if you say SMPTE, they know it's an acronym.
Okay, there we go. No, I just asking because I was like, I've almost never seen anybody say it that way, and so I was confused. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Would it be wise to have multiple eclipse locations for office hours and then decide at the last minute based on the weather, long and short range forecasts?
We are going to have multiple locations, but we're only going to have one that we really have a lot of infrastructure, and you just can't put that infrastructure in a lot of different places. And the problem is that those places have to be so far apart that it wouldn't necessarily make sense for us. So we are focusing heavily on Texas, but we do have other people all along that spine taking a look at it, and we also have we are partnering with some other partners to get additional feeds. So we probably will have somewhere between 8 and 10 feeds that are coming to us, but we're not going to. The issue is that we really want to have bandwidth, not just coverage, but bandwidth, so that we can have some interaction and so on and so forth there. And that's really hard for us just to organize and put it in a lot of different places. So anyway, I think that's the real issue. And so we're hoping, Texas we think is going to be a good place to go, and I guess we're going to find out. so anyway, so stay tuned for that. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia. One of my favorite authors, Bryce O'Connor, tweeted that he was invited to the beta of Audible's virtual voice. Is this the beginning of the end for professional audiobook narrators?
I don't think it's the end for the high-end narrators. So the narrators who have been, have really built up, and because I think that there is, you want to listen to a certain kind of person, or you want to listen to those kinds of things. So I think it's fine. I think that the problem you really have is the feeder system going in. So the feeder system going in of people who have to work their way up, those folks that are getting paid a lot to do the highest quality books are, they spent a decade or 15 years or whatever making money going up this ladder that goes through that. And so I think the problem is what's the feeder system at that point? Like, how do you get into this business? Because all the low end stuff I think is going to go away. Like, and I just think it's really hard to listen. It's hard to see how anybody is going to be able to do small books like at a low rate when I could have it done for free. And so and the thing is I can have it done for free in like 15 minutes. Or I can have 2 weeks of someone reading it. I don't see how that is going to pan. I don't see how there's just a physics problem there. And I will say that a lot of the reading, if you listen to the typical ATEM, which is turns out to be the first one in 11 labs. Like, no one got creative and went down even to Bill, which sounds a lot like Bill. It's very odd. But it does. And we asked Bill, and Bill had no idea. We were like, there's a Bill in 11 labs that sounds exactly like our Bill. So I wonder if someone just grabbed Bill's name and grabbed a bunch of office hours and chunked it in and turned it into Bill. Anyway, so but I think that I think it's really hard. And the other thing I think is, for a lot of fiction, again, not the highest end where you hire a bunch of actors, but the next layer down, the kind of the pulp fiction kind of fiction that goes out for a lot of these things. I think what's going to be really interesting is you can set actors and a narrator and define all the different voices and then hit go. And 20 minutes later, you're going to have something that has all the different voices and all the different bits and pieces. And again, it's not going to be as good as a human actor, but does it need to be? When you can make it much more available, because a lot of these books can't do that right now, and so it's a matter of putting those all in. I get frustrated looking at any book now that doesn't. I've been using audiobooks since the late '80s when they were cassette tapes, and so for me, I get frustrated. I just want anything that would fill in the gap. Like, I don't really care whether it's a human or not human. I prefer a human, but I would do anything. And I will tell you that automated voices are easier to listen to at 2x than a human voice. So as a person who listens to things very fast, I often would prefer to have the automated voice, because the diction tends to be better and I can listen to it at a higher speed. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I don't know. I think didn't Audible sue Amazon for their Kindle reader at some point that would do text to speech built into the Kindles? And I think they could do this right now with the new Tensor chips that have come out that could probably go into those Kindles easily. You could then load a model into your Kindle along with the hundreds of books that you have in there, and have a selection of different readers you want to click for each one, and have it read much more naturally with a synthesized voice built into the Kindle. So I would think that's going to be a big market for this. And this is probably why Audible is going for this virtual voice as opposed to paying people to read them and then sending them out as audio files. You send them out as text files and have text to audio conversion that sounds good and is believable by a variety of different voices. That's a pretty handy way to distribute books cheaply.
Well, and also in many, many, many languages. So, like you could take a book and convert it to 60 languages, overnight, or eventually in the cloud, 15 minutes. And so I think that this is a really hard thing to avoid, because it's just so efficient. Like, there's certain things you go, oh, that'll take a little time. Like when people say AI is going to replace, us, visual effects artists. I'm like, well, there's a lot to being a visual effects artist. Anybody who says that you can just replace a visual effects artist with AI is not a visual effects artist. Like, and I don't mean that we're being protective. I'm just saying that there's a lot of complexity there. Is it going to make our job easier? Is it going to reduce the number of hours that we work? Probably. But is it going to replace a person doing those things? Probably not, because there's so much custom stuff that we need to do that people aren't seeing. But books are reading, and this is something that large language models are really good at. And I think that it's going to be something that, and again, we're only hearing audiobooks for the top 1%, maybe the top 10% at times of the entire market. There's a huge market there that is losing out on that opportunity, and we're losing out on that content because it's not being converted. So I think that you're going to end up with, there's just an enormous amount of pressure there to make that happen. Go ahead, CJ.
Courtney, I also remember there being some litigation around the Kindle's text-to-speech. If it was between Audible and Amazon, I guess they figured it out because now Audible's owned by Amazon. But I'm really excited for all of the text that Alex was just mentioning that would never ever get an audiobook is now all of a sudden accessible to people who don't have time to sit there and read, people who are commuting a lot, people who have time where they're doing other things that now they can be enriched. Also, literacy is not something that should be taken for granted. There's a lot of people who are going to be able to learn and get more intelligent if they can hear it, if there's an oral tradition of that knowledge being passed along rather than just the written word. So there's and besides that, also accessibility. The ability to open up that knowledge to a whole bigger swath of people is really, really exciting.
Next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. Has anybody been modifying their ATEM buttons after seeing Adam Tao's appearance this week?
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I've played with it a little bit, mapping buttons. Actually, there are several people that have done this in our group before, not with Mix Effect, but with a companion module, the Blackmagic companion module. And it actually works okay, but the thing I don't like about it is that it's dedicated buttons for other things that you're using. So I'll probably still keep using my Stream Decks and my X keys for things that matter, because it's kind of fiddly to remap buttons, and then sometimes functions will work. So I like dedicated buttons better.
Yeah. Go ahead, CJ.
I like the idea because there is of using a second ATEM as the controller, because there's a lot of us who started with a mini and moved up to an extreme, and now we have one that's not necessarily in use all the time. I feel good about there being absolutely zero chance that the native button triggers, because this ATEM that I'm pressing is not in production.
Sorry, I was trying to set something up. I did something very complicated. I thought that we have a little extra time here, so we'll see. We might cut this off at the end, but since we have a little time, we're at the end of the questions right now, and I thought since it's Saturday, I would give you an update on how I'm using. And I did a very complicated thing to do this because I just thought of it while we were doing the last two questions. Of how to do an update on Mimo. I don't think this is worth a whole second hour, but I can give you a little sense of how I'm using it. I've been kind of updating this process, and so
the Michael, I'll throw in the Michael Krasny show is looking fantastic. Like, to see that iterate is really, really slick.
It's a very, like, you just see me slowly kind of keep turning that corner of adding a couple. I have a rule. So what you're seeing is doing it over and over again. Rather than adding a bunch of things, I tend to add one thing at a time. So I just go, today, like this week, I'm adding this. This week, I'm adding this, And so I did add, I cheated, and I added two things on this one. I know, call me crazy, but I added two things, which is that I added the ability to take lower thirds from, I'll see if I can get it working. I'm just in the wrong Mokana right now to do this, so I'll see if I can figure this out. But I added the ability to take the questions from Mokana and put them into, there's a lower third system that's built into Mokana that we don't need it here because we're using SPX. But I wanted to make it easy. So it does with Alpha Channel. We just added Alpha Channels with HTML5 so that we can have the little question pop up. And I have enough controls that I can match the look that I had in the show. And so I'll show you what it looks like right now. Here, hold on. Let me see if I can get this to, there we go. So this is what Memo Live looks like right now. And we'll come back to this after the break as well. So there's a couple things that are there just so you can kind of understand what I'm looking at. And I have to admit, I want to say, I say this every time, but thanks Oliver it was a very green eggs and ham experience for Oliver, because I kept on saying, I do not want green eggs and ham. I do not want them on a train. I do not want them on a plane. And Oliver's like, try them. You may, and so he just kept on pushing on it. And when I say Oliver pushed on it, they pushed on it for years. So anyway, this is how it looks right now. And again, we'll come back over the top of the break after we get through it. But what you can see here is, you have the countdown clock. I have the question that needs to come in. It's up top. Now, what happens is these are all my sources in Memo Live, and this is my layers. So this is how they're layered. And then each one of these, as I select them, let me see if I can change my view here. As I select them, I can, as you select any one of these, you get all the attributes. So these are all the attributes that I have down here, and then these are my outputs. These are my, whether it's records or my live streaming, these are all there so that I can do those outputs and I can see what the program is. I can see some program audio. So these are some of the things here, and we'll get back to this in just a second. Real quickly, just a quick reminder that at 9 o'clock, so in about an hour, we're going to have the volunteer meeting. We're going to talk about volunteer opportunities and answer your questions about volunteer. It's a good time for you to come and ask questions about volunteering, as well as we'll give you some sense of what's coming up and what's available and what the signups are going to look like in the not too distant future, and answer your questions. So stay tuned for that at 9 o'clock. You can come back. We'll put an announcement out in Discord. All right, back at the top of the hour. We're back. What were we talking about? Oh, right. We're talking about this. So anyway, you have these attributes. And now one of the things that I've done here is I have, you'll see all these different, these are different what we call layer variants. So I can add a layer variant. So it's the same layer, but it has different things to do. And then I have down here, these are the layer, what are called layer sets. And so I name each one of these. And if I open these up, what happens is that you see that there is a mixture of things that are turned off and live and what variant I'm using in those to make that actually work. And so so that's what I have here. And so now the cool thing is that I have these. And so what I can do is if I click on this top one, you see slate. If I click on the next one, it starts a countdown. That countdown is a movie that I made in motion. And by the way, setting up all these slates and the movie and everything else, I'm down to yesterday, or the day before yesterday, it was a little under 7 minutes to get all of the slides that I need done. I do the slides in Keynote, and then I just do the countdown clock, which is already preset. So I just draw a slide in and hit go, and it renders it. So it's really, really fast for me. And then I have a solo. This is going to be a video return because I'm sending the video into itself. But then I have a 2-up, and that'll zoom over, and this is what's coming in over Zoom ISO. So this comes in over. Now, Mimo can take Zoom. I can bring in Zoom directly. The reason I don't do that is because I'm delivering audio from Zoom ISO out to loopback and then out to audio hijack. And that's how I'm recording my main record. And I want that to be a separate linkage so that if Mimo has any trouble or does anything odd, that I still have a separate pipeline for that. So that's why I do it as slightly separate. I separate that skill out. Now, what I'm working on, my next thing to do, now that I've got the show going, is that I'm going to be recording. I'm going to jump in as a second ISO instance, and I'm going to record, do my audio records to a Mac Mini, and then let Mimo jump in directly and pull that feed for it. So they're completely separate, because what really matters to us is the audio. Anyway, so we have this. So if I hit this, you have this, and then if I want the guest to be talking, I hit this layer set, and you can see it kind of zoom up and give some space to that. If they want just a 2-up, I click this and it comes back down and it puts up there. It should put there. Oh, that's the 2-up here is got lower thirds. There you can see the lower thirds. We did Jane Wales. By the way, the show is great. So stay tuned for that show. So then we have this, and then here's this does a 2-up, but I decided I didn't want the lower thirds, so I added that. And then if there's a question, I hit this. Now, there's the question there. So that's the last question I think that I asked about Somaliland, as I do about Africa. So this is, but what you're seeing there is that transition is that's just changing the state of both of those layers, as well as bringing in the lower third, and that lower third is just a HTML5 from Mukana. So that's how that works. And then when it ends, I hit it here. Now, one of the interesting things you'll notice if you watch the audio there from this one, so you can see the audio bouncing down below. So you can see this here. Now, what when you see me go to end, you'll see that drops right off, because in the layer set, I turn the audio off while I'm turning the screen off. That way I can close the mics real quickly. So when I put up that thank you for watching, it's turning the microphones off so that they're clear to YouTube immediately. So that's another little bit and piece that I have here. Now, the thing that I added, the second thing that I added that I spent way too much time on last weekend, was that I added a control surface for it. This is Mimo. I'll try to say Mimo. Mimo has an app that you can download on the iPad, and it just finds if it's on the same network, it'll just find Mimo on the computer. So let's see if I can do this here. Do you see it there? Hold on.
Can you turn on your mouse on your screen share so we can see it a little better, or highlight it with the telestrator, because we can't see where you're.
Well, this controller here, and I don't know why that Ask Office Hours up, but I can't figure out how to turn it off. I had to use Mix Effect Pro to quickly build the super source for Mimo, so there's a lot of things going in and out. Anyway, but what you can see here is if you watch over here, so watch this. I'm going to hit these buttons. So I designed this little interface, and the way you design this is if I hit edit, I'll switch it to edit here, and you can see that I can add things. So I can say, oh, I want to add a button. Let's see, that button here, and I'll tap on it, and I'll say, I want this to be a little bit bigger. I made the grid, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I made the grid really small so that I can have control over it. So there's 2 up. I can go in here and say, I want the 2 up to have, for instance, a couple people, and I want to make the font size bigger, and now I have that. And then I can make it, it's too small now, so I'll make it a little bigger. There we go. So that now it's there. So that now I've made that new button, and that's how fast it takes to build the button. And so I have these buttons here. Now, if you look at when I start hitting these buttons here, or when I hit the buttons here, notice the buttons, notice what's happening over here. So for instance, I'll hit slate, and there's I got to go into live mode, enter live mode. There we go. Slate. And that you see this starting soon now. There's my countdown. So I hit the countdown button. I can hit end, and it's going to go to thank you for watching. But typically what I do is I do slate, and then I'm going to do the countdown. And when I get to the end of the countdown, I go to Michael's solo. That's, it's a feedback in here. And then I might go to 2 up, which is going to give me my 2 up. Then I'm going to go, I want the guest. And then I want the 2 up with no lower third. There's a question. So I'll pull this up, and the question will roll in. I'll go back to the guest talking a lot. And so all I'm doing is sitting there hitting my iPad quietly. I'm not trying to find those layer sets. And so I have that interface there. Now, if I want to, at the beginning of the show, of course, I want to start live streaming. So I will, if you, let me see if I can do this for you here. I'll close these up for a second. And you can see there's Michael's ISO and the remote OSA. So I record both of those ISOs as well. And so what I can do here is, I can hit, if I hit start streaming, notice that you'll see the red over here, started here. And if I stop the streaming, you'll notice that if I hit stop, it'll turn green, should turn green. And then if I'll hit it again, so I'll hit that. So that turns the streaming on. And then, here you can see start records. So I can start them individually down here if I want to, or I can just start both of them here. So I hit that top button, and it starts both of the records automatically, together. And then it's a really simple controller to do that. And then if I want to stop them, I just hit stop all, and you'll look at the red lines down here, and you can also look at it over here. You'll see them all shift. So I hit stop all, it'll just turn them all off, and then we're done. That's the end of the show. So, and I will say that it's a pretty, I would love to see that in Mix Effect Pro of having an interface that I could design, to be able to control. It's fine to do the companion stuff, but it's really great to build an iPad app, an iPad interface that lets me just tap through those things during the show. I can have a very complex interface that it took to build it, but then when I'm actually working on it, I can have, just individual tap, 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 tap. It makes the show much simpler, in my opinion. And the linkages worked much better than I expected. I haven't had any issues with it. So anyway, so that's what I'm working on there. And again, it's a little bit of a test since we don't publish the live. You can only see the live if you're watching live. So you have to jump in and watch it. So as a result, it allows me to experiment. So you're watching me experiment because I'm not publishing it yet, but we're getting pretty close to feeling like it's high enough quality that we're willing to start publishing it and streaming it in a wider market. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, I thought since we had time, I'd show you. I don't think that's a whole second hour, but I think it's worth showing a little bit since we had some time. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
Next question from Juancy Robles in Mexico City, Mexico. Can we see an impromptu lab on sharing USDZ models in the Vision Pro?
I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can set that up that fast because I have to put contacts in to do it, and so which I don't have. I'm waiting for my lenses. I was a little late on getting the prescription up. Save that one for next Saturday.
Would you like to see beautiful things?
Yeah. You should show that. So CJ can show it there.
All right, give this a shot here. So, just a moment. Let me unlock this. Okay, so, and I need to go back into the real world to hit the cut button here. And in the preview is my Apple TV. Oh, and I have to just, all right, so give me just a moment. I have to, when I take the headset off, it unmirrors from the Apple TV. So I need to reset up mirroring. I thought I had it all ready to go. Oh. Well, maybe I can't. Sorry.
Next Saturday.
I thought that I had it, but the Apple TV's now. I'm doing it live, and it's not working.
There we go. Yeah, we're still figuring that. It takes a little bit of setup. We'll get good at it, though. I promise that we're just getting started, but we're getting good at it. We will get better at it as far as sharing it goes. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
Next question from Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Today's mention of Ross video switchers brings back memories and makes me feel way too isolated. Could the panel lay out today's landscape? My world was once Ampex, now mainly Blackmagic. I have lost track of others like Grass Valley and Ross.
They're all doing stuff. They're all doing good stuff. I mean, so it just really depends on the scale. So, Ross is, it's kind of halfway between the Blackmagic stuff as far as cost goes, Blackmagic and Grass Valley and Sony. I mean, what we mostly see in trucks and in larger facilities are a mixture of Sonys in the trucks, Grass Valleys in some of the larger installations, and Ross also mixed into those sections. And so it just depends on how well someone knows Ross, because it's a really capable set of systems. And then, but the large portion of the pyramid. So I would say that if you think about the pyramid up here, the Sonys, the Ross, Sony, Ross, and Grass Valley all sit, in this top area here. And this is mostly separated by, as far as hardware switchers go, is separated by 4A. So when we go overseas, we see 4A. We almost never see 4A in the United States. I mean, in the real world. I mean, I see it at NEB. They have a big booth. They're making money. But we don't see 4As in the United States in general. I don't know why. No, they're good. They're relatively good switchers. Blackmagic is below when you're not buying a Ross, Sony, or Grass Valley. I would say that Blackmagic as a hardware switcher is 90% of the market. After that, as a software switchers, obviously you have vMix and you have TriCaster, and we're testing Vector, and there are some gamers are using OBS, and I just showed you how I'm using Mima Live. So there's a lot of different things that start to break up when you go into the software world, and there are a lot of software companies that are doing they build vMix stations or Mimo stations or those types of things, and so those are happening in software. So, but when it comes to hardware, I would say that it's again, Grass Valley and Sony are really on the very large installations. The next step below those are typically Ross. It's just a little less expensive to go there. Panasonic makes switchers. I used to own a bunch of them. I had a 450 and a couple 400s and some 50s that they have there. And they keep, they've added NDI and other things. I just don't see. We used to see Panasonics in events all the time because they're rock solid. They always work. They're just very limited. Like loading a still into a Panasonic would take like a minute. It's just like it'd be slowly.
Awful user interface.
The interface was just disastrously bad, and it was and again it was and that's the big thing with Blackmagic is. I don't know what the numbers are, but the rumors are that they sold somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million of the minis, the minis and mini extremes. And it might be even more than that. It might be millions of them. And so the thing is you have a lot of people, like, to put it in perspective, that's probably 1 million switchers, probably 99% of the market, by numbers, 99.9% of the market, for the number of switchers that are out there. And so there's a lot of people that know one interface. And so that doesn't affect you today, but 5 years from now, it makes a pretty big impact. I do think that Blackmagic needs to take what they've done in hardware and put it in the cloud. So I think that they're going to miss the boat if they don't take their switching software and make it software. And I think that they're in the business of selling hardware, but I think that they're missing the opportunity to be in the business of, if they took the Blackmagic stuff, made it resolution independent, and charged $50 for it, just fully locked in, they'd probably wipe out the online, the cloud market. So because there's so many people with the other things, but I don't think they'll do that. Go ahead, CJ.
You just made my hair stand on end a little bit talking about loading stills into a Panasonic switcher. I just had flashbacks to I'm going to launch Photoshop. I'm going to edit this score graphic. Then I'm going to put it into MX Navi, and then I'm going to import it. I was like, never again.
When we first got our first little Blackmagic switcher and we were able to just drag files in, we were like, oh my gosh. Oh my, we were just like, what? Because I had all these, and you got to get the Panasonic 450 was like a $25,000 switcher that I used there. And so I had this little switcher that cost $2,000 or $1,000 that did everything I needed to do for what we were doing, and was so fast. Anyway, that's why we don't use the Panasonic switchers that much. Roland makes switchers as well, mostly for VJs. I think that's really their focus. It's their market. Next question.
Next question is from Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. For my control needs, I've been using a Cherry POS keyboard with a Raspberry Pi to generate messages into NodeRed, then to CentralControl, where some automation then happens across various devices. CasparCG, OBS, ATEM, X32 Rack, lots of buttons.
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I would wondering if you would be able to share some of this, how it works. Especially, I'm curious about NodeRed and the automations in CentralControl, how you've mapped this out. I've done something perhaps a little bit similar to what you're doing, but I use Companion and do all my automations in Companion and to trigger multiple devices. But I would be interested in how you're doing it. So perhaps you could share it somewhere, either on Discord or come on the show sometime.
Yeah, we should do. I keep on meaning to do a Friday with NodeRed, and so we should take a look at that. Maybe that's one of our IT subjects. So I think we were just talking about that the other day. Next question.
Bo Cordell from Charleston, South Carolina. If we're unable to travel to the eclipse, is there an opportunity to help on the crew?
There absolutely is. So ping me in Discord if you're off. We kind of closed that up, but we still have opportunities there. There's going to be managing all the streams. We are partnering with Virtual Video Control Room, so VVCR from LiveX. So Corey's going to help us with that. And so we'll need people to kind of manage that process to kind of cut all that together for the show. So we'd love to have some folks helping us put that together. Next question.
From Gabriela Excasio Mistiera in Sault Ste. Marie, really excited about the Husky desks until saw a demo the other day. Where do recommendations like these come from, and why do influencers highly recommend things they don't own, don't use, and their only experience is to hear someone bought it? Hard to separate facts.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think that, a lot of times here we look at things and, I think a lot of people try to answer the question as best they can, and they saw something that they thought would be really cool. And I think sometimes we're basing our conversations on other people in the group, that do have them. So I think that's some of the bits and pieces. But you should always take anything you see on the internet and think, oh, that person liked it. I should probably get 2 or 3 other opinions before I buy it, or buy it from somewhere you can return it. Next question.
Next question from Mark Giuliani here on the panel. Does the Apple Vision Pro have an HDMI port? If not, how do you send the video out?
So the way that I'm sending the video out typically is that I share it with the Apple TV. So I have an older Apple TV that I no longer use. It's a 4K, but it's one of the earlier 4Ks, and I have it plugged in. It's literally called Switcher. Like the only thing it's there to do is add switching to it, and so. So it's plugged straight into my switcher, and all I got to do, I can, from anywhere in the house, I can say share to switcher, and it will end up on the switcher. So Anyway, so that's how I do it. And there is a developer I'm told. There we go. There's a developer connection for it, another $300 that you can plug it in, and I believe that will deliver HDMI as well out of it. So I think that's what Jason Beisch is doing. Is he said it's a much higher quality video. And now we're able to see the demo from CJ.
We're live, yeah. So I'm in my little immersive environment,
and what you're looking at there, right, is that is going into your Apple TV.
Yep. So I'm AirPlaying to the Apple TV right now, and you see my mic is kind of coming into frame a little bit. But one thing, when you do a Zoom screen share, it will not pass through your external environment, but screen sharing to an Apple TV will. If you screen share to Zoom, everything in the background here just looks black. But a FaceTime will allow the whole thing. And this is that beautiful things.xyz that Alex was talking about earlier. I brought the iPod Classic Gen 1 over here, and I can grab the little thing. If I pinch it, I can make it really big. And if you have a high quality model, but look at how even the reflections, it's showing me something that's behind me. That's really impressive.
I think it's actually something in front of you. If you look at it, it's just mirroring the thing that's in front of you there. It's just taking that image and using it as a reflection map.
Very cool.
Still really impressive, and it feels like it's working.
I think my favorite part about this is they have the little manufacturers and the dates. So Apple, they call it iPod Classic 2001, which is funny.
Yeah.
But my favorite so far has been there's a pizza slice in here. It's from 1934. New York City is the manufacturer.
Oh, that's funny.
So,
that's good.
There have been tons of models in here. You sent me down a rabbit hole mid-show.
Yeah, is that the pizza slice? Oh no, I didn't see it.
Oh, was that
anyway?
It?
I thought it was up there a little higher. Anyway, so but yeah, those are great ways if you want to see examples. Next question.
Next question from Joaquin Matus in Imperial Valley, California. I have an interview subject who's adamant about having inline mute switch on their wireless body pack. What are my options using a Sony UWP wireless system?
I'm surprised that the Sony doesn't have an inline built into it. I actually am not familiar with that belt pack. Most of the belt packs that I use are either Electrosonic or Shure's, for production. So Axient is a pretty popular one, or sometimes the ULX. So I'm not as familiar with the Sony UWP, but I am surprised that there's not a switch on that body pack that lets you mute it. Almost all the body packs that I use have some kind of switch on them that's muting. So I don't know. Mickey says Shure and Remote Audio make inline mute switches for lavs and headsets. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there we go. So take a look at that for those. But yeah, I do agree that having an inline, I once was speaking in front of 1,500 people, and we had a 10-minute break, and I took a break the way you would normally take a break if you're on stage, and I came back, and everyone was sitting there, kind of 1,500 people, like just staring at me with big eyes, and I looked down at everybody, and I said, I didn't turn my mic off, did I? And the whole room just exploded. So anyway, it was good. It was good, clean fun, but it was not intentional. Anyway, fortunately, there was nothing horrible. Just inconvenience. It was like a movie. Like there was a movie that was like that somewhere. And so, except I think that he had a whole stadium. I only had 1,500 people. Anyway, there you go. Great Saturday morning. Good little demos and questions. Thank you to the panelists. We can't do this without you. Thanks so much for showing up on a Saturday and being part of it. And of course, we'll do this again tomorrow, as we do every day. But we really appreciate the panelists for all the great answers and the great conversation here. Thanks to the producers for the great questions. We really appreciate it. We can't do that without you either, asking those questions. Quick reminder to always, if you're listening to this now, one question at a time. If I'm in the back end and you're doing the QR code and you have a bunch of questions that are all stacked on top of each other, it's not going to ever make it to the show. So you just need to, one question at a time in the QR code. We get a couple people that ask the same question all the time with multiple questions in it, and those just are getting rejected. So just so you know that, like, you need to one question per QR code. Anyway, but thank you so much for all the great questions, and thanks to the incredible team on the back end who makes this possible every single day, 7 days a week. It's just an incredible, and if you're interested in doing that, we're having volunteer meetings in a minute. It'll be real quick because it'll be to the point. It's not an intro to volunteering. We do that once a month. This is the volunteer meeting, but you're welcome to come and look at it. And we'll talk about that, and that's going to happen in about 37 minutes at 9 o'clock. So, and we'll put out a little announcement in Discord if you're interested in that. You can come and ask questions about volunteering, not about volunteering, but about your volunteering experience so far. This will be a little, it's not really an intro, but we'd love to see you there. We traveled 47,000 miles. That is 76,000 kilometers. And that is 375 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Got to test some demos today. Yeah.
I know.
Sorry about the switch on the reader. I was so close to getting it.
So good.
It felt like Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
Well, the funny thing is, I decided to do the memo thing so quickly at the end, the memo thing. I like minutes before I did it. I was like, oh, I got some time, and because I had been struggling with, is that really worth a second hour? I was like, I don't think I can do an update for a whole second hour, not yet, anyway. And so I thought, it's good to put it in somewhere, and but then I realized I need a 2-up so that you can see what's happening in Memo and what's happening on the iPad. And so then I quickly opened Mix Effect and got the ATEM set up for 2-up, because trying to do that really quickly in the ATEM would be impossible. So I jumped into it and quickly set up the 2-up. And so it was funny. I felt like I was, you're 2 different pieces of software control for the switchers and trying to pull it all together, but it worked okay. I got to figure out a better way to be able to show program without program. Anyway, I got to figure that out. So
without
that'll
it
keep on
feeding
doing
back,
yeah, without the feedback.
Here's my hero.